Okay, great. Good morning. Our team consists of myself, Chris Anderson, Neha Mehta, Andrew Hamilton, and Eamon Courtney. And over the past several months, we had the opportunity to work with Dr. Chang at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab on a post-combustion carbon capture process that we believe, after much analysis, has the potential to dramatically alter the carbon dioxide footprint of the existing coal power plant fleet around the world. Today, we want to provide an overview of Dr. Chang's innovation, as well as share some key findings from our market analysis that we conducted. But first, we thought it was appropriate to frame the context of our presentation with providing the long-term case for carbon capture. So hopefully this is no surprise. Climate change poses a tremendous threat to life as we know it today. The chart on this slide shows historic and projected carbon dioxide emissions globally for the International Energy Agency under current carbon mitigation schemes. With carbon dioxide emissions expected to surpass 40 gigatons globally by 2035, we're on a clear, unsustainable path. Many experts believe, could render the Earth potentially uninhabitable. So, looking at carbon dioxide emissions now, of the 30 gigatons emitted in 2008, approximately 43% originated from coal. So what you can draw from that is, any serious plan to reduce global carbon dioxide emissions and therefore tackle climate change must address coal-derived emissions. A recent study conducted by the IEA determined that carbon capture and storage was a key component of the lowest cost solution to stabilize carbon dioxide atmospheric levels at 450 parts per million. Now, in determining the lowest cost solution, the IEA looked at the marginal cost of abatement for a variety of mitigation methods. This includes renewable generation, fuel switching, and efficiency gains. Now, I think shown on this chart as the blue map emission scenario, it's important to note that carbon capture and storage represents 19% of the estimated reduction in global carbon dioxide emissions per year by 2050, or approximately 11 gigatons of CO2 abated per year. Now, without that piece of the wedge, if carbon capture and storage is not successfully deployed, the cost of achieving this goal increases by over $1 trillion per year. When we looked at the market opportunity for carbon capture, stationary sources stand out as a compelling opportunity, particularly because they represent approximately 2/3 of carbon dioxide emissions from fuel sources. So, one thing that stands out from this chart is that not all stationary sources are created equally. Particularly, there are key differences in the gas stream concentration of carbon dioxide and the amount of CO2 emitted per source. So not only does coal represent the largest amount of CO2 emitted of any stationary source, but the concentration of carbon dioxide in the gas stream and the amount of CO2 emitted per source is substantially higher than any other fuel source. We think these two particular characteristics make the retrofit of existing coal-fired power plants a particularly compelling opportunity for post-combustion carbon capture. And so the point of this slide, is to really address the question of, if coal is such a nasty and pollutant fuel source, why not just abandon it altogether? And I think, we acknowledge that coal creates substantial challenge for addressing climate change, but it also creates significant opportunity, particularly given what we've termed the 3 Ps. It's proven, it's prevalent, and it's price. Coal-fired power plants have been in use and proven in the United States for over a decade and currently amount for approximately 45% of domestic electricity generation. Furthermore, there are approximately 143 years worth of global coal proven reserves, more than twice that of oil or natural gas, making coal the most prevalent fossil fuel on Earth. With over $1 trillion worth of coal-fired infrastructure in the U.S. alone, this is a significant investment that can't be abandoned overnight. Finally, the levelized cost of electricity from coal-fired power is approximately 18% below the average retail price of electricity in the United States, making coal a very cheap and secure source of electricity. So simply put, coal is here to stay, at least for our lifetimes, and we have to find a way to make its use much more sustainable. So Neha will now walk you through the overview of Dr. Chang's technology.
Thanks, Chris. As we made a case that coal is going to remain a crucial part of future energy mix, it is imperative to look for CCS research pathways which can be implemented to existing coal fleets cost effectively. Next few slides will walk you through what is the current technology for CCS and what are its drawbacks and how LBN's innovative process addresses those challenges. The most widely used capture system nowadays is a standard amine absorption stripper configuration. The process begins with flow gas from the power plant being sent to the capture system downstream of all environmental controls. The gas flows up to the absorbers in the absorber column, where it reacts with the amine solution and mixes to produce a amine-rich CO2-rich amine solvent. Here comes our first challenge. Amine solvents degrade at high temperatures as well as corrode the equipment at such high temperatures available in the regenerators, thereby requiring additional cost of stainless steel scrubbers as well as pipe workings. Some solvent technologies like KS1 as well as Kester, they use solvents which are really costly, and such degradation of the solvent can result to a huge cost in the CCS cost pie. Coming back to the process, the regenerated amine solvent is sent back to the absorption column, thereby completing the process loop. The reaction rates in the regenerator are extremely slow for the current processes, thereby resulting in longer retention times as well as longer or higher tower heights, which of course adds to the cost. Finally, the steam input provided to the thermal stripper is taken directly from the host power plant, thereby resulting in a drastic reduction of the generation capacity. A 500 megawatt plant, after installation of CCS, is able to produce only 350 megawatt of generation capacity. That means a 30% reduction in the capacity of production. This is also termed as parasitic energy. We believe that LBNL's solution have answers to all those challenges. The way our process works is, we don't allow the amine solvent to reach to a high temperature zone, thereby avoiding degradation as well as corrosion. It is achieved by using intermediate solvent, potassium carbonate, in the absorber section. As you can see that potassium bicarbonate over here reacts with the rich CO2 amine solvent and produces potassium bicarbonate slurry. This potassium bicarbonate slurry is sent to the regenerator, and by research it shows that potassium bicarbonate has no signs of degradation as well as corrosions. The process also uses inexpensive additives in the regenerator, thereby enhancing the reaction rates, which can also result in a reduced tower height. The additives added are also resulting in a reduced regenerator temperatures around 60 to 80 degrees centigrade as per the lab scale results. To put it in a perspective, all the current solutions have a range of regenerator temperature around 90 to 120 degrees centigrade. We believe that with all those performances, LBNL can drastically reduce the CCS cost, but it is necessary to see where it fits in the competitive landscape. Most of the current technologies like ecoamine chilled ammonia, Siemens postcap, and others have a range of parasitic energy between 28 to 16%, which are quoted in their technical reports. Our technology has a lab scale result of 12% as parasitic energy loss, which has a scope to be reduced further by utilization of waste heat, which is enabled by the low range of temperature in the regenerator section. The chemical solvent used in our process are inexpensive compared to the MHI KS1 and Kensol solvents, which are around $300 or $120 per LB mole. By using inexpensive additives, the rates have been drastically improved, as mentioned before. In a given time frame of 8 minutes, conventional ecoamine solvents regenerate 20% of the solvent, whereas Dr. Chan's process regenerates 55% of the solvent. We do understand that technology is still at the lab scale and it's too early to predict, but we can definitely say that this technology, with its development, has potential to be a cost-effective solution to CCS. With this, I'll hand it over to Andrew, who is going to talk about the market opportunity for our LBNL's technology.
Great, thank you, Neha. So my colleagues, Chris and Neha, so far have framed our position that carbon capture from coal plants will be an essential part of addressing climate change, that addressing coal emissions from existing coal plants through post-combustion technology will be an important solution, and finally, that Dr. Chang is exploring a technology solution that has the potential to improve the economics of existing chemical absorption processes. In the following slides, I'm going to walk through two important questions: the where and with whom the opportunity lies in the short to medium term. So the U.S. is very reliant on electric coal-fired power plants for electricity. As you can see, 31% of installed capacity and 49% of electric generation comes from coal-fired power plants. The difference between the installed capacity and generation reflects the abundance and the cheap price of coal as a fuel stock. We believe that in the short to medium term, the United States provides a fantastic opportunity for nascent technologies like Dr. Chang's. In particular, we feel that it provides ample intellectual property rights. We believe that there's an abundance or a significant amount of capital available from both private sector as well as from the government. As a matter of fact, the IHS published a report last month stating that the United States is the global leader in investment in carbon capture technology, $4.5 billion over the past 3 years. Now, we do think that the opportunity will ultimately be global. As you all know, the European Union and China are both large emitters of carbon dioxide and have large installed bases of coal-fired power plants. But we think, again, just for the initial stages, that the focus on the United States will be the opportunity. So the relevant opportunity for the United States is approximately 313 gigawatts of power. However, we think that we need to be somewhat conservative in analyzing which of these plants are actually retrofittable. At the end of the day, there needs to be enough useful life to warrant such a capital investment. And so really only those plants that are younger than 35 years are appropriate candidates. Furthermore, there are economies of scale involved with carbon capture and sequestration. And therefore, we think that only those plants with over 300 megawatts of capacity. And finally, we recognize that the flue gas stream needs to be fairly clean, that sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides can be corrosive to the chemical absorbents, and therefore pollution control equipment needs to be in place. Pollution control equipment can be very expensive, and therefore only those plants that already have the equipment in place should be considered. And so at the end of the day, we've narrowed down 152 locations, which represent 89 gigawatts of installed capacity, which is approximately 28% of the total U.S. generating fleet. So we briefly mentioned several slides ago how private capital will be a key part in the progression of carbon capture and sequestration technologies. Now, we recognize that the technology is very expensive right now and that it will dissuade many investors from being involved in the space. However, we do think that the involvement of key stakeholders proves that carbon regulation is really not a question of if, but when. And in particular, we noticed that the large U.S. electric utility companies have been involved in carbon capture and sequestration technologies for over a decade now. As you can see from this chart, we have a list of some of the larger utilities with large coal fleets. And one thing that all of these guys have in common, despite their differences in geography and size, is that all have been involved in some form of carbon capture and sequestration exploration. Take, for example, American Electric Power. They're the largest user of coal in the United States at 77 million tons per year, and 65% of their generating capacity is coal-fired. They've been involved in carbon capture technologies ranging from IGCC to post-combustion capture technology. In aggregate, their investments represent hundreds of millions of dollars of carbon capture exploration, and this table altogether represents over $1 billion of invested capital. So we've shown that large stakeholders have invested in carbon capture despite its high costs, and that interest in innovative solutions will continue to accelerate as costs continue to decline. And as a matter of fact, we've seen a trend of declining costs over the past few years. Here we're illustrating a study between Alstom and EPRI. They partnered to look at carbon capture at existing power plants. And as you can see here, in the past several years, we've actually seen a decline in terms of dollar per kilowatt of installed capacity for a retrofit by almost 50%. At the bottom of this table, you'll see the Northeastern plant, which was ultimately canceled. But I included that anyway because that cost estimate was made in 2007, and you'll see that the replacement project at Mountaineer plant had already seen a reduced cost estimate when it was proposed to the DOE last year. So to reiterate, as costs improve across different carbon capture and sequestration technologies, we think that interest should increase. And in particular, we'd like to illustrate the fact that capture tends to be cited by many sources as the most expensive component of carbon capture and sequestration. Dr. Chang's technology addresses carbon capture. I'm going to go ahead and pass this along now to my colleague Eamon, who's going to walk through some of the ways for early movers in carbon capture and sequestration technology to further mitigate the costs of implementation.
Thank you, Andrew. There are two ways to decrease the cost of carbon capture, one of which, of course, being to decrease the cost of capturing the carbon itself, which, in this regard, my colleague Neha made a compelling case for how LBNL's technology can achieve significantly reduced cost. The second way of reducing cost is by finding a customer for that CO2 that you're capturing, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. If you look around the world, regulation has started to take hold in isolated regions. However, it's fragmented and it's at an insufficiently low price to really drive widespread carbon capture adoption. If, for example, you look at Australia, some observers there believe that Australia would have to triple its price to have a meaningful impact. However, in the near to medium term, there's another way of improving the economics, and that is through the sales of captured CO2 to industrial users of CO2. We considered various industrial users of CO2. On this chart, you'll see both established markets for CO2, such as those for enhanced oil recovery or the food and beverage industry, as well as projected markets for CO2, such as that for liquid fuels, which includes fuels such as renewable methanol, for example. Note that these markets are very small, that any one of these bubbles represents less than 1% of total CO2 that can be made available through carbon capture. However, we believe that these could prove essential partners for improving the economics of those near-term demonstration projects, which are a necessary technology development step for our technology. To evaluate these different markets, we considered three things. First, their size, which is represented by the bubbles on the chart. For reference, enhanced oil recovery, that bubble is about 50 megatons per year of CO2. Also the market maturity, which is denoted on the x-axis, as well as the price sensitivity of the customer, which is a metric that we developed. Basically what we did is we took the price that customer was paying for their input CO2 and divided it by the price they were receiving for their output product. So in a way, it's an estimation of the percentage of COGS, or cost of goods sold, that CO2 represents for their product. From this initial list, we truncated it down to these several markets to look at further. In particular, we wanted to look at how compatible they were with the given market. And by compatibility, what I mean is how easily could we drop in our technology in the value chain for each of these industrial users. Note that this graph, the axes are normalized, and it's better to be far away from the origin as opposed to close to it. In our interviews with oil field operators, we found that our technology was very well suited to serve enhanced oil recovery market. In fact, or furthermore, we found that in particular geographies, the demand for CO2 for our purposes creates an opportunity to capitalize on a price premium. For example, we know of customers in Texas that are paying upwards of $40 per ton CO2 there. Looking ahead, LBNL has two primary technology challenges to address, and they both involve taking where they are, which is in the lab, and proving that they can do it on a commercial scale. We've identified a path for LBNL to address these challenges, and we also believe that there are mutually beneficial partnerships that can help LBNL along the way. The first step is techno-economic analysis, and we believe that engineering firms as well as government entities are capable of being good partners to produce this analysis. From there, the next step would be slipstream analysis, slipstream testing, which is where you would actually go to an active power plant and siphon some of the flue gas from the stream and use that with your technology to get real-world data regarding your performance. And there are both government slipstream testing programs as well as some interest from progressive coal companies and potentially serving as sponsors or partners in this regard. And then finally, commercial demonstration would be the end game. And there again, progressive coal companies would be great partners, as well as potentially these industrial users who could help improve the economics of the project. In summary, it is clear that the U.S. coal fleet is not going anywhere soon, and that retrofitting coal will be an essential component of reducing CO2 emissions. Post-combustion chemical absorption methods, such as LBNLs, in particular LBNLs, are well suited for this challenge, and LBNL's technology goes further by uniquely providing an opportunity to utilize waste heat in its process as opposed to burning additional fuel to provide steam for the process, or steam for the regenerator. Moreover, as my colleague Andrew pointed out, technology improvements will allow us to continue to gain experience and move down that learning curve. But in the meantime, to improve the economics, there are industrial users for CO2 that could create opportunities to get these commercial demonstrations projects off the ground. And in closing, we'd just like to thank all of the wonderful people that have helped us along the way and provided their generous time and expertise to our effort. And at this time, we're happy to take any questions you may have.
So we're missing microphones, so how about I just point it over?
So once you capture the carbon, it's cool. I speak loudly. So once you've captured the carbon and stored it, where exactly do you put it for the long term, and how long does it stay there?
Yeah. So actually, that's probably a better question for the next group that comes up that's addressing sequestration. Our technology is actually just focused on carbon capture. So that, part of our exploration was what can you do to actually make carbon capture sort of a more attractive investment, given the high capital costs right now, and Eamon walked through some of the industrial applications. But yeah, our technology did not necessarily address what to do with captured carbon.
What I didn't get a feel for was, quantitatively, what does the LBL process do for the levelized cost of energy, and then how much do you get back from assuming that you can sell the CO2 in one of these industrial processes? And once you've done both those things, how far off are you from where a coal-fired plant is now if it's not using any capture?
Could you just repeat the question? I couldn't hear it properly.
So there's a current LCOE for a coal-fired plant with no capture. You have to pay something to do the capture, and then you're assuming that you'll get some value back for selling the CO2 into an industrial process. Once you've done both those things, what's the LCOE of that final energy look like compared to a standard coal-fired plant? I mean, how far off are we? Are we still off by a factor of 2, 5, 10, or are we good?
Okay. So to answer that question, my first point would be, technically speaking, if the technology is installed in a power plant, the first cost reduction will be in the form of parasitic energy. So if it's employed to a slipstream testing, then the expected cost reduction is potentially around 50%, which is expected if it works everything well. And the rest of the cost, when it's going to the industrial applications like EOR and all those things, it's probably said that it might break even. It won't be able to recoup or make profits because EOR market is growing and many other players are coming into it, but it's probably going to break even, which most of the technologies are not able to do it yet. So, yeah.
Hi there. I was curious about your position on the China market, why you had not gone into greater depth, or whether or not you see there's particular qualitative risks or opportunities there that would be good to approach.
Sure. Yeah, so again, it's not that we don't see opportunity in China. It's simply that at the initial stages of this technology, I guess just taking a step back right now, we're looking at a technology that is currently at the lab test level, and ultimately we'd like to get it to slipstream testing and commercial scale. I mean, ultimately this can be a 5 to 10 year process. When it comes to intellectual property rights, availability of capital from private and public industry, we simply think that the United States offers a little more opportunity in the short to medium term. But again, it's a fantastic point. At the end of the day, there's just going to be a lot of opportunity for retrofit of existing plants, and in China, as well as the EU and other nations, will be viable candidates.
Following on the question of costs, how much of a difference will a better solvent make in just the capture portion of the costs? Because there's, you have to, you still have to build the same equipment. You still have many of the same costs. So what difference will this solvent make?
Well, to just give it a perspective, ecoamine, which is the baseline process for flow developed by flow, the solvent loss because of degradation and all other corrosion and all those factors, that accounts for 20% of the cost of the CCS pie for the makeup and all additives to be added to avoid all those corrosion and degradation. If a process tries to use expensive solvent so as to enhance the reaction rates or to avoid corrosions and all those things, those solvents are highly costly. Like, as I mentioned, like Mitsubishi's solvent is like superb in their reaction rates, but the cost of the solvent is like around $300 per lb mole. So even they have improved on the reaction rates, that cost is so high that it cannot trade off that reaction rate increase. So in that way, if your solvent you are using is costly, it's going to be a substantial, like around 10 or 12% part of your CCS cost pie. Does that answer your question?
I saw a number up there that was something I wanted to focus on. You have a 28% potential market, but I look at the 800-pound gorilla, which is 72%. And so as you made the slice and dice, fundamentally you went from a coal plant that was 35 years or older as not potential. You went to a market that essentially is addressing a minority of the coal-fired plants in this country. Is there a learning curve or fundamentally a cost advantage over time with exploration that will be able to address the other 72% of the population?
Well, I think we certainly hope so. At the end of the day, though, the carbon capture universe is going to be addressed through various technologies. And so, for example, it may not necessarily make sense for post-combustion technology to be installed in much older plants. We might see a future where new plants are built with IGCC or oxy-combustion, syngases, et cetera. But the 28% we think was a conservative estimate, and as the technology's ramped up, certain cost advantages and efficiencies are realized that, again, we want to be more conservative now rather than overly optimistic. But it is possible that, say, certain pollution control equipment or whatnot may not need to be installed theoretically. Those are things that we will need to explore in sort of the next stages of the technology's evolution.
So you had an 18%, I guess, average cheaper LCOE for coal than other energy sources. So you've got a 12% inefficiency impact from this technology. So now you've got maybe 6%, just playing with rough numbers. Do other costs and other aspects of the process close that LCOE improvement of coal, benefit of coal closer to break even? I mean, I'm most interested in that LCOE, that 18% average figure.
Well, talking about the LBNL's process, which says that there's a 12% reduction in the output of the power plant when it's installed. That figure has come from the lab scale testing, which was done at LBNL, but it was not done by utilizing the waste heat. So that figure can be substantially reduced to a single-digit number, which by utilizing the waste heat from the flue gas itself, because the flue gas which comes from the power plant is at a high temperature, and to go to the absorber, that flue gas has to be cooled. So that heat chunk over there can be sent to the regenerator to meet the energy demand. That hasn't been done yet. That's the next step to be done. But if it's done, that energy cost or that energy penalty is going to be coming around in some of one single-digit numbers. So talking on that terms, it would be probably a good investment to do, because other CCS research pathways probably have double-digit numbers of energy loss. And if you have a single-digit energy loss, and further we say that you can sell it to the other industry partners, or maybe if we have regulations sometimes sooner, then probably you will be the leader in the coal market. So.
And just to add to that as well, in talking with various EOR plants, for example, for their transportation costs and storage costs were very, very small because they have this infrastructure already in place to handle all this. And so our early demonstration projects would exhibit very low or fairly low compared to the total cost of things like this transportation and storage. However, if you're looking, beyond that to where you're entering the mass market, then of course, figuring out a way to transport this CO2 and store it somewhere then is a much bigger issue. But again, based on where we are, we're so far from there that we didn't really look all that much into it.
Great. Thank you, carbon capture.